All right, what is up? My name's Jake. I studied biblical history at Moody Bible Institute, and I wanted to talk today about a subject that's kind of taboo to talk about in church, depending on what church you go to. But it's the subject of Satan and the whole role that he plays in the biblical narrative, because I think it's really important that we understand the role that Satan plays, especially because I think popular culture has turned Satan into this big, powerful demon that's able to control people, and he's kind of pathetic in reality. Like, he's this sniveling little, oh, but do you actually think God meant that? Is that really good for you? Like, does God know what he's doing? And his whole plan to deceive humanity is to just be like, God doesn't know what he's doing. And I think that the Bible is very clear about that. So I wanted to read through a few different passages that I was reading today, and just talk about why this is so important to the biblical narrative. I wanted to start in Genesis 3 because that's sort of where the whole story begins, with the fall. So if you wanted to read along, Genesis 3:1. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals that the Lord had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die." "You will not certainly die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." And I think that part, that last line where it's like, oh, you'll be like God, I think is so important to who Satan is as the character and the person in the Bible. Because his whole, purpose is to try and deceive humanity, but the only way he ever does it is by being like, you should be selfish. Like, God has his plan? Nah, think about yourself. And in this first story of in the story of the fall, in Genesis 3, Satan doesn't come to her and be like, if you eat of the fruit, I'll give you all this stuff. If you eat of the fruit, I'll give you everything you could ever wish for. I'll give you 3 wishes like a genie. No, he was just like, I mean, God said that, but think about you for a minute. What if you were God? And I think that that's exactly who he is as a character. But that's not the only place that it's talked about. It's also talked a lot about in the book of Job. And that's the other part that I really want to look at before we get into the final kind of the story that shows the difference between Jesus and Satan. And in Job, the whole point of the book of Job is to show the way that people who are faithful to God are rewarded for their faith. And in Job 1, it sort of gives us a prologue to that story, and it says, tells us Satan's role in the story. So if you wanted to follow along there, Job 1:6, that's where I'm going to start. And it says, "One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, 'Where have you come from?' Satan answered the Lord, 'From roaming around the earth, going back and forth on it.' Then the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on the earth. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil.' 'Does Job fear God for nothing?' Satan replies. 'Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything in his hands? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread through the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike down everything that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face.' The Lord said to Satan, 'Very well, then everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger.' Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord." And it's another great example of Satan looking around and being like, I can't believe that people would follow God. He's only in this because God gave him stuff. Like, if you take all that stuff away, he's nothing. He's just going to walk away. And Satan keeps looking at it like this thing of, oh, well, people are just selfish. They just want stuff for themselves. So if I take all the stuff away, then he won't have any reason to follow God. And his whole perspective is just that we as humans are only in it because God gives us stuff. And so in Genesis, he talks about how, you should take it, you should be selfish and take this thing for yourself, and that will be the benefit. And then in Job, he talks about, oh, well, God only gives you stuff because he's proud of you, and that's how he's buying your faith. And that whole perspective of, like, Job is only in it because of the stuff that God gave him just outlines how much Satan thinks about God as, oh, he's buying people's love, he's buying people's faith, he's selfish himself, he wants all the glory for himself. And Satan is trying to oppose that by wanting to be the thing that takes God's place. Not just in our lives, but also in general. He wants to take over and be in control. And the idea for him of giving people things to put in the place of God is really tempting. So in the first story, it talks about how he presents this thing of, no, you should choose this for yourself. Be selfish. Take this thing for yourself. In the second story, he talks about, oh, well, take away his stuff and he won't love you. But the third story I want to talk about is in Matthew, and it's in Matthew 4, starting at verse 1, when Jesus is out in the wilderness, and he gets to it's the story of Jesus being tempted in the wilderness. It says, "Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, 'If you're the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread.' Jesus answered, 'It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God.' Then the devil took him to the holy city, and he said to him," he had him stand on the highest point of the temple. "If you are the Son of God," he said, "throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in your hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone." Jesus answered him, "It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. "All this I will give to you," he said, "if you will bow down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." Then the devil left him, and the angels came and attended him. And this is the final story that I wanted to talk about that kind of lays out Satan's character. Satan's talking to Jesus here. He's not talking to Job or Eve or any of these other characters that are humans with flaws that live in sin. He's talking to the Son of God. And his plan is to try and tempt him. And so he goes through these three different temptations where he says, first, when Jesus was hungry and he said, "Hey, turn those stones into bread." And if you look at it and read it again, it says, he had gone into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." And it doesn't say that he told him to do that because he was hungry. It doesn't say, like, his temptation isn't, "Oh, you're hungry, you should get some bread." But he's challenging Jesus' authority, and he's saying, hey, if you're the Son of God, then you can do this, right? Like, use your power. Like, you have it. Just do this thing for yourself. Choose some bread for yourself because you're hungry. It's fine. And he's acting as if Jesus is this person that can fall into temptation. And so he's telling him, hey, you're the Son of God. Do whatever you want. Like, choose for yourself. Make a choice for yourself. Choose the bread for yourself. Be selfish. And Jesus responded, "It's written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." And his response just perfectly goes against what Satan just told him. But then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. And he gives him this thing where he says, jump off, the angels will catch you. Like, prove you're the Son of God. Do this thing, like, show that they care about you, and that, like, prove that you're in charge. And again, Jesus responds, but it's in a way that I had never really thought about it, because his answer is, "It's written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." And I think he's both talking to Satan of being like, hey, don't test me. I'm the Son of God. Don't test me with all of these things that you're saying. But I also think that he's saying, hey, I'm not supposed to test God either. Like, I'm not supposed to jump off of this thing and be like, prove yourself, God. Prove that you're real. He's saying, hey, none of us here are supposed to put God to the test. You're asking me to do this thing that goes against the very basis of who I am. And I think it's just so interesting because he says, don't put the Lord your God to the test, but then right after this, Satan gives him another test. And I think it's interesting to think about it from that perspective of him being like, I'm the Son of God, and I'm not going to put God to the test because it's commanded that I don't. And I just always thought of that as him saying, hey, stop testing me. Stop putting me, like, Jesus can stand up to the tests, and he does by being tested again right after this. And I think it's interesting that he's saying, hey, we're all held to these things. Even me as the Son of God, I am held to the same standard, and I'm not going to do it. But that third one says, again, the devil took him away to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. All this I will give to you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. And I think that the part of that that's so interesting is that he's taking Jesus and saying to him, if you're just selfish, like, you don't have to sacrifice yourself. You can just take all these kingdoms. I'll give them to you. They're yours forever. Like, just think about yourself for a little bit. You don't have to go through all that pain, all that suffering. You can just have all the kingdoms of the world. You can rule everything. Just bow down and worship me. And it's so interesting to me the way that Satan is constantly portrayed. Because every single time that he comes into the story, it's always, think about yourself. Don't think about God's plan. I know God has a plan, blah, blah, blah. No, think about you. Think about how you want to eat the fruit. Think about how you want your family and your property and your sheep. Think about how you want to eat and have the kingdoms of the world to bow down to you. And the way in which that temptation is in opposition to the plan that God has. Because in Genesis, God's plan was for man and woman to walk with God in the garden forever, to live in perfection. And Satan said, hey, choose the opposite, because selfishness is the opposite of God's plan. And in the story of Job, Satan goes to Job and he's like, hey, I'm going to take away everything you have so that you walk away from God. But that's not what happens. Job stays with God and rebukes the things that Satan's trying to put into his head. And he's like, hey, I'm not going to choose selfishness because God's plan is for all of us to be in part of this story. And then he goes to Jesus and he says, hey, be selfish. Choose yourself. Choose the things you want instead of the plan that God has. But the plan that God has ends with Jesus. And it it doesn't end. You know what I mean. This story of redemption comes to Jesus, and Satan, as this one last chance effort, says, please think of yourself. Don't think of all the billions of people who you are going to die for on a cross in the most painful way possible. And it leads us to this kind of a turning point in the story in probably the most famous Bible verse out there. Like, everyone has probably heard it at some point. But in the Bible, in John chapter 3, verse 16, it says, for God so loved the world. Not for God so loved himself that he made us worship him. Not for God so loved us few certain people that he chose because they're the best ones. No, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. See, the story of the Bible isn't about us choosing ourselves and the things we want and the things we think are best for us. The story of the Bible and the successes of the Bible are in the times that people looked at the things they wanted and said, God is better. And I think that we as Christians now are especially held to this because we've been told this message. Those of us that have heard this message and believe it are held to a higher standard. We know that we are on the side of God, and that the side of selfishness, the side of greed, the side of all of those things is the side that Satan is sitting on. And he's saying, hey, come over here. Just take a little bit for yourself. It's fine. But we stand in opposition to that. We've heard the message. We're held to a higher standard. And so when we're tempted to be greedy, when we're tempted to choose things for ourselves, we're told that we're supposed to stand against those things. Because God loved the world. Not just you, not just me, not just your pastor. He loved all of us, and he still does. And the next time that you're tempted, not with money greed, not with greed of things that you have, but when you're tempted to be selfish with the message of God, the perfect message of salvation, and you're tempted to hold it into yourself because you're embarrassed, because you're thinking that someone might judge you for it, I am begging you, please don't. We have heard the most perfect, incredible message ever. And we know that this leads to everlasting, perfect life with God. And there's so many of us that still choose to hold it in and to not give it out to people who are dying on the inside. And so, if there's anything that you take from this video, think about the fact that Satan builds his whole plan on selfishness, on the fact that we're not going to go out to the people around us and care for them. And I'm begging you, please, to go out and to talk to those people and to say, hey, there's this story that I think you would enjoy to hear about. I think that you should read the Bible. I think you should talk with me about the story of salvation. Please go talk to those people. Please pray for those people. Please show them the way that selfishness is the side of the devil, but that love is the side of Jesus. And thank you so much for listening along with me today. I'm hoping to put more of these out there and just be able to talk about the Bible like I love to. But yeah, if you have any questions, leave a comment or talk to me somehow. And I'd love to see you whenever I put out my next video.